Welcome to the last episode of the Path Talk Show of the season. So we have two exciting guests today. Ray Coombe. So he is a coach at MMA FFT, and he's also the founder of Be Inspired MMA, and he's also a striking coach. And we also have Coopar Royale, who is 5-1. He is ranked number 2, I believe, in Asian Pacific region, and he is also a 1FC fighter. Welcome, guys.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
No problems. It's good to have you both, and I've known you both for quite a while now. So I met you down during the COVID times when everything just started to open back up, and you made the move to Sydney for a little bit. And I met you around the same time as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's been a while now.
Yeah, for sure. So, Ray, I'm quite interested in your story on how you became a striking coach, because I know with certain life occurrences that possibly would have held a lot of people back, but it never seemed to hold you back, and you kept striving towards the success of being a great striking coach.
Well, I was having this conversation probably just a day or two ago with my wife, and I was talking about now with MMA evolving the way that it is and how important wrestling is, and obviously jiu-jitsu and grappling. And my background as a kid was never in those areas. So I started out at the age of 8 in a karate club, which a lot of kids were doing probably back in the 80s, certainly in the 70s. Karate, taekwondo, kickboxing, that was more the norm, whereas now there's been a big shift to a lot of those schools have now probably changed their front signage to jiu-jitsu. So it's really had that kind of shift. And even wrestling as well. Like when I was back at high school, friend that we both have, Stefan Jaggi, we went to high school together, and he was the only kid that I knew that did wrestling, and I remember I'd be at high school sizing up all the kids because I was always in fights at school. And I remember I met Stefan, and there was this like ripped up little muscly dude who's about a year above me. I thought, nah, probably best off being friends with him. So I started out in karate at the age of 8, and then ventured into boxing when I was about 14 or 15. And yeah, so it was interesting because I was born with a vision disability. So like kind of it's classified as legally blind, but I'm not blind. I can see, but it's quite a, what's the word I'm after? Like it's a fairly significant, vision setback that I have. So I was chatting to my wife the other day and a few people, and I just said, like, had things have been different, probably now I probably would have had my parents would have just put me into jiu-jitsu. And that probably would have been much more beneficial to my condition, because obviously people who practice jiu-jitsu can be completely blind, same as judo. Wrestling, to my knowledge, is a little bit difficult with eyesight because you still have the stand-up factor where you got to set things up, but definitely where there's contact with jiu-jitsu and judo, blind practitioners are doing it all over the world. So mine was like the opposite, where I went into karate and boxing, and it was really, really hard for me to do. But my dad, who's got a background in kind of cricket and footy, like typical Aussie, he just, he didn't know any different or any better. And because I was struggling so much as a kid, he was like, right, we need to do some type of self-defense or martial arts. So karate and boxing was kind of the norm back in those times. So that's how it all kind of kicked off.
That's amazing. And it kind of brought me back to a guy, because you especially mentioned about wrestling as well. There was a guy I knew who is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and he's also blind, but his blindness comes from a fire accident.
Right.
Where he struggled to see, but he actually started wrestling first. And he became successful, where he won multiple New Zealand national titles and Oceania titles, and he used to represent like New Zealand at the Commonwealth Championships. So I find, like yourself, like you persevere and you overcome anything that goes in your way. Right? Like a lot of people will play victim and they will blame other people for their upbringing or their life or situation they're in. But you are someone that is quite inspiring and is quite unique. And I think that's such a special gift you have, where you are able to help people in terms of striking through karate. And also I see you go above and beyond by helping people with taking them to wrestling, to jiu-jitsu, And now you're working alongside Renato as well. So
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, it all started out, pretty humble, beginnings. As I said, my dad enrolled me into martial arts purely because of self-defense. Because, like back then it was the same old story, just the bullying and being in fights at school. Plus I was really small as well. So that kind of was like a bit of a double-edged sword. I remember starting high school and I was literally like the smallest student in the whole school. It was about 1,400 kids. And even including the girls, I was the smallest. I was like tiny. So I always called myself like the cross-eyed run to the litter, So there was always that kind of factor. And then my dad was very, I guess like you could say, tough love. So dad always took that approach of like to overcome your, handicap or setback, we need to increase the training. So he had this kind of really unique kind of style about him. And even to the point when I started, he was like, we're going to take this really, really seriously. And I was just a kid. Like I was just a kid that was struggling. I didn't really know any different. And I mean, to the point that mum and dad, they were working really, really hard and they didn't have a lot of money. And they literally went to the bank and borrowed like a lot of money at the time to get myself to Japan to train. So, and I was over in Japan putting in about 6 hours a day. And I was nine and a half years of age. So my dad had this idea. He was kind of like, the kids are here. This is where all the boys are. And you're down here a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to literally triple the effort. We're going to take this like, above and beyond to try and just get you competitive, just to get you in the game. And it was really interesting. It worked, but it was hard because I got so much advantage because my dad was coaching me at home. My dad was crazy. He'd have all these books. I mean, it wasn't the internet back then. Like we're talking about the late 80s, early 90s. And dad would have black and white karate books. He'd have magazines. We'd get VHS videos we were buying from Japan. And I'm just a kid and my dad would just like tie me down and like he'd be, reading these books and telling me to make these shapes and positions. It's so funny to think back now because we've advanced so much with, YouTube and online tutorials. That didn't exist. So I'd be there, be like, put your arm up here, put your arm over there. And I'd be like, this guy's crazy, and so then he's like, come on, we're going to go to Japan. We're going to go here. So we went everywhere for him just to get me up and up and up. But the challenging part was no matter how much my skills improved, the eyesight was always this thing that kind of was this weight on my back because obviously with striking, no matter how good you get, like your technique or your skill might be really, really high, but at the end of the day, you need to measure the distancing and you need to measure the timing between yourself and the competitor. So that setback was massive for me, and that kind of created a whole different way of thinking between me and my dad, my younger brother as well, to try and work out ways that we could be competitive and just like, what could we do? And one of the big ones was footwork. So my dad was like, you got to move, right? Because you can't see. Even now today talking about it, it's almost hilarious. It's very funny. Like I can remember being in the car with my dad and these kids beating me up at karate competitions and training, and dad put me into boxing, and boxing was like chaos. Like I was getting murdered out there, and dad would be like, you got to move your feet. So we'd be watching Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali videos and Sugar Ray Leonard. He's like, look at the footwork. And then we'd study all the great Japanese karate guys and pick up all this stuff. And fast forward decades and decades later, I'm working with, young superstars like this guy and putting that into their kind of arsenal from what we'd worked at so hard just so I could be in the game,
That's great. And it's amazing to see what you've achieved over your time. And I still remember when Stefan was showing me a video of you, I was like, this guy is going to be coming here, and was so excited to introduce me to you. And yeah, it's been a pleasure meeting you.
Yeah.
And he told me a lot about Coopar as well. It's like, oh, he's number one in Australia. He's coming down here to move to Sydney. Would love to actually host him in wrestling. And tell us a little bit about your journey coming to Sydney and how you built your relationship with your coach?
Yeah. My journey coming to Sydney, I'm here full time now, but it's been a while in the making. I think 4 years ago,
Yeah.
2020, is that right? COVID?
Yeah, 2020, yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
2020 was the first time I came to Sydney. And I guess how that came apart was there was a boxing opportunity on a fight night here, one of the big stadiums, and
Come on, say it. You have to say it. We were saying it for like
the
Tim Zoo undercard.
Tim Zoo undercard. Oh my god.
It haunts us. It haunts us.
Man.
Yeah, so I was in Rocky, struggling to get fights, and Ray calls me up and he's like, "Hey man, we've got this massive opportunity, blah blah blah. Okay, what is it? We're fighting on the Tim Zoo undercard, boxing debut. Let's go. You're coming to Sydney. You're gonna stay at my house for 6-8 weeks. Let's do a massive camp. Let's do it. We're gonna smash it." Unfortunately, that fight never
Yeah, it didn't eventually.
never happened.
Got it.
It stings. But that was the start of me coming to Sydney. Came to Sydney, did the whole camp, got about a week or so out, and we realised that, you know, there was a bit of miscommunication, or, you know, maybe they were trying to stitch us up with the weight class, this and that. So we did, we pulled out of that fight. But in that 6 to 8 weeks that I was here, I got a feel for Sydney. I stayed with Ray and his wife Tanya, and I just fell in love with Sydney. And that was when I was like, yeah, I'm gonna move to Sydney. Took 4 years, but I'm here now. So yeah,
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's taken a while.
Yeah, no, it was funny. Right before you came in as well, Ray was showing me a photo of his son, and he had your T-shirt on. And he says he's your biggest fan.
Oh, he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, this guy just can't do no wrong. Like, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he stays with us. It's really funny. He stays with us, and my wife and I, and like we're busy. We run our business and that, and we're always trying to look after him. And we're like, so you might need to find somewhere to live here, you know, in Sydney.
Yeah.
Somewhere to live that's not our place. And and my son, whenever Cooper leaves, and like he's like, "Where's Cooper?" And we're like, "Oh, he had to go home, or he's staying here." And he's like, "Why? Like, why would?" Bring him in, like he wants him to live there, you know. He just loves him to death. So
That's amazing.
It's really cool.
No, it is cool, and I really respect. The last time we caught up at box class, and you spoke about how you had a special relationship with him, where you both speak on a daily basis in terms of when it comes to upcoming fights, or even probably outside of that as well. How's your relationship like when it's heading towards going into a fight?
Our relationship, myself and Ray's?
Yes.
It's no different to outside of heading into a fight, I don't think. You know, as much as it's a student and coach relationship, it's very much so, you know, father and son, or, you know, big brother, little brother relationship. But just heading into a fight just gets a bit more serious, I guess. You know, he puts the coach hat on a little bit more, takes the father-son aspect out of it. But yeah, just really just turning more into like a coach, and, you know, being a bit harder on me than usual, I guess. Yeah.
That's great. And I saw a recent video of you the other day with Renato, with what's his name? The world's strongest man, Alex.
Alex.
Yeah. I saw him just kick you across. How did that feel, like receiving that kick?
I mean, it didn't feel good.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
No, it was all good. We were playing around.
Well, that's part of the coach's thing, actually. I message him, I rang him, and I'm like, "Mate, what are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh." I go, "We're on the phone." He's like, "Oh, my body, I'm sore. I've been training hard. Oh, my ankle's hurting. My back's hurting. My shoulder's hurting. My neck's hurting." And I'm like, "Well, mate, we're training hard. We're getting ready for a fight." 2 days later, I see this guy who's 100 kilos kicking him into another dimension. And I'm like, "I'm not sure that that's going to help with the whole recovery thing." And he's like, "I know, dude." He goes, "And we did about 50 takes. And they just used the first one." And I'm like, "Do me a favor. Don't do that again. He's a big boy. He is such a big boy."
It's been fun with Alex. Like, we play around a lot like that.
I bet. Yeah. That would have been like a free chiro session almost.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But like, you know, back to what you're saying, like we, you know, we keep in contact. Obviously, Rockhampton, where Coop's from, is a long way away. So we've been in contact. I mean, we keep in contact fairly regularly, don't we? Like sometimes a little bit more, quieter when fights are down, or he's head back home to family. Like we kind of realize, like after some of the fights, he'll go back home, to his family, see his girlfriend, and he has that kind of downtime, and then he'll then contact me and be like, "We got to fight." He starts getting itchy again, and what's happening? And we talk fighting all the time, but we always keep in contact whenever there's big fights on, whether it be like boxing or UFC. We always call up afterwards and give our running commentary. It's really interesting, actually, how I've learned a lot off this guy. Like, in regards to fighting, he's got a really unique mind and way about it. We regularly speak about fights, and we see the fights really differently. Like he has it's almost like this upside down world. Like I'll be like, this and this about a certain fight, and he'll be like, yeah, but what about these factors or this thing? And we always like really, have these different ideas. Like even one argument that comes to mind is pretty funny, because this guy's actually the world's worst fight predictor. He's hopeless. If you want to make big money, it's so interesting because he's so knowledgeable on the game. He's brilliant. But then all this brilliance, somehow, like he fails on the final step. I don't know what goes wrong with him, but if you want to make big money on sports bet or something, call Coopar, ask his tip, and then back the other guy. I don't know how he does it, but he's consistently useless. But one that he did get, which I'm still ashamed of to this day, is that like I'm a really big fan, and I've got to spend a little bit of time. We both have training with George Kambosos, and when I think it was only like 3 years ago the other day when he fought Teofimo Lopez. And we're chatting all things boxing and that, and I love George, massive fan. I know you've worked with George and met him through strength conditioning training and so forth. And
you should train at the same time at Ethos.
That's right, yeah. And I know he knows you because I've spoke to George, and he's like, "What do you reckon?" I'm like, Teo's just so heavy-handed. He's knocking everyone out, and he just seems like unstoppable. And he's like, "George is going to win this fight." I was like, "Really?" I'm like, what? Based on what? He goes, "Oh, this and that, and rah, rah, rah." And when George won, he's like, I told you. And he's like, "You're a fake George fan." I'm like, "I'm not a fake George fan." I'm like, so it's funny, but we always go head to head with it. And like, but then on the other side, like, because we're both big fans of Volk, obviously, as well, being Aussie and the whole thing, and Volk being a legend. But he loves Max Holloway. So he was very emotional to Max. And I'm like, man, Volk's going to smash your boy Max.
I was even in the gym with Alex around these times of these fights, and I was like, no, I'm still rocking with Max.
Yeah.
100%.
So, but no, that's, so yeah, we're always in contact. And and then, leading into fights, we, obviously with Coach Renato now as well, we're constantly in contact and, discussing the opposition and, discussing future moves and everything that Coopar and Coach Renato and myself have been trying to slowly build together is the foundation for the next 6 months and the next 12 months. And so we've got, obviously, like every fighter, you've got big dreams and big aspirations, but we're trying to really instill into Coopar that we need to build these things to get to there. Otherwise, if we don't build that, it's going to collapse,
100%.
And a big part of that has been his, getting his life together outside of the cage. In the cage, it's where he really excels. He's definitely at his most comfortable when he's fighting. I feel like Cooper's at his best when he's actually fighting, even more so than when he's training or sparring. He's good in those areas, but he just seems to be better at just performing. That's where he's at his best. And we're like, we know you can fight, and we know that you've got the ability and the potential, but if the other areas aren't taken care of, it's just not going to work.
That makes complete sense.
Yeah, we're going to go, one step forward, 2 steps back. So, and to myself, my wife Tanya, and we've had a lot of other people create this little network, even friends of ours that have put in a lot of work and hours and just time into helping Coopar. Just, you see someone who's come from a bit of struggle and, well, maybe not a bit, maybe a lot of struggle and a lot of, disadvantage, so to speak. And then we're just trying to help push him in the right direction, because you can see he wants to make something of his life and do well. So we're trying to collect a good little army of people to keep pushing him. And then, you know, Coach Renato's been a real pivotal point in that as well. And especially now organising sponsorship and accommodation. And we're building a really, really good network behind Coopar. And that's something I've tried to instill into him in the fact that all these fighters that we look up to, and you see your Conor McGregors, your Max Holloways, the list just goes on and on and on. I've always tried to tell Coopar that it looks like a one-man show. You see them in the cage, in the ring, doing these amazing things, but the amount of work that is going in behind the scenes is hard to believe. And I've always told Coopar, I'm like, unless we build that team and we have the right people in the right places, you're not going to succeed. It's just not. It's too big a job to do by yourself. You can't possibly take that on.
It kind of reminds me of a quote, which is one of my favorite. It takes a child to raise a village, where you need to be able to collaborate with a lot of different coaches and people in order to make a successful person. And especially with your upbringing that, like, obviously you're not ready to share yet, but I find tough times molds people into diamonds, because they can either burst the pipe or always turn into the diamond you hope it would be.
Yeah.
And it's great to see that you're collaborating and building Coopar to become a successful athlete that he is. And you, with your extraordinary talents in striking and your unique abilities, will help you stand out even more as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's also worth mentioning, like, we've always spoke about the thing that we've always loved together is fighting, martial arts. Like, we love it. You know what I mean? Like, we're always talking about the history of fighters. We love this guy has so much knowledge on half the time. You know, I'm just agreeing with him, but I don't even know who the hell he's talking about. He's like, you know, he knows all the fighters, everybody, inside out. Like, he knows the guys that are just entering the game to the past, you know, retired legends of the sport. And we always talk about building this history and like how it's a book and a journey. And it's well worth mentioning as well the fact that what got Coopar started was a really good friend of mine, Coach Brant Kogel, who's up in Rockhampton. And that's how I met Coopar, because we both go back in karate long way back. And Brant was really successful with his karate training and journey and so forth. And then many moons ago, we were at a karate comp, you know, like point scoring karate competition. He said, I think I want to have I still remember, he's like, I want to have a cage fight. And I was like, dude. I was like, have you seen cage fighting? I was like, it's not karate. Like, and he's like, but he's a tough boy, you know, like Rocky's a tough area, you know. And he said, no, I reckon I could do it. And he jumped in there, and he was in his early 30s and ended up having about maybe 4 or 5 amateurs, and ended up having about 10 pro fights. Fought some really big names domestically, you know, guys like James Varke and Jack Della, and the list goes on. He's fought some really high quality people and achieved a lot. And over the years, I was working with Brant, and he come to Sydney and did a fight camp with me, and he said, I want you to corner me. I said, dude, I can't corner you in MMA. I'm like, what the hell? He goes, no, I got my guys for jiu-jitsu and that. He said, but you know my karate, you know my style really well, and I need that information because that's my area. And I was like, yeah, okay, look, I'll do it. And Brant was the guy that really got me across into mixed martial arts. That was my first ever exposure to it outside of, you know, watching it. And not far around that time, he spoke to me and said, I got this kid. He goes, this kid, he's only about 17, 18. Is that right about the time? 18, yeah, 18. And he said, he sent me a video, and it was this guy. And at the time, Brant hadn't done much boxing or anything like that. And I was always into boxing. And he'd had an amateur fight. And he sent me this video of this kid. And like the things he was doing was just above and beyond technically what he should have been doing at that point. Like usually you see some kids, they got a good jab or there's a bit of toughness or whatever, but his head movement, his evasiveness and his timing, you could see it straight away. It was a standout. Like for a young, like a puppy, it was like, wow, that is different, you know. And he was piecing this guy up, and he said, yeah, man. And he kind of mentioned Coopar a few times to me. He was pretty proud of him. And he's like, he was just always, it was interesting how life works out. He's like, I really want you to meet him. I want you to meet him. And I was like, yeah. But we live a long way away. And I didn't really think much of it. And then Brant had me come to Queensland. He fought James Varke, who was undefeated at the time from City Kickboxing. And I was cornering Brant, and I met Coopar, and he was training under Brant. And that night, Coopar fought on the undercard, and he got like a 8-second first round knockout, you know. And I was like, okay, this kid's pretty good.
So I got to mention that morning, me and this bloke here, we'd like barely even said a few words to each other, and you know, it was fight day. I'm just, you know, moving around in the gym a little bit, and he goes, "Do you want to hit pads?" And I was like, "Don't usually hit pads on fight day, but sure, let's do it." And we hit pads for about a couple minutes,
not
2-3 minutes, like very short and sweet, and we hit some shots, and he was like, "Wow, man, you're really on. Like, you're on. I can't wait to watch you tonight." And yeah, that night was a quick night in the office, 8 seconds. So
that's amazing.
It was just cool because we barely even spoke to each other, but we connected through the pad work, through martial arts. You know, like that speaks.
No,
so much
I understand it through
you know?
wrestling. Yeah. Like you just have that bond that you can't explain. It's like almost like you're watching someone play a instrument like a guitar, and then you have a guy who plays the drums, and then another instrument, and they just gel together. It's like you're watching a beautiful art piece just play out in front of you. When you go into fights, do you feel like when you step into the cage or the ring, do you feel like you're at home?
Yeah, very much so. I say it all the time. It's when I'm at my most like happiest. It's like my most free. It's like I've listened to fighters before saying, you know, they feel like they're taking the shackles off. It's very much so like that. We put in all this work, weeks and weeks and weeks, well, months and months, years and years actually, into this one 15 minutes, you know, but when you're actually there, it's just, you just feel free. Like I just feel at home. Yeah. There's nothing like it for me. It's my favorite thing to do.
That's amazing. And like you said before, like he usually rings you a couple of weeks after that he's itchy again for the fight. Like what brings that on to you? Like how long during the break do you get itchy again? Was it like straight after?
I was going to say a few weeks is a bit stretched. Sometimes straight after we're having little talks about what's next, like how soon do you reckon we could go again? Like is a week, is a month, like, but I think it's important to have a little time to switch off. Injuries, the body takes a lot during camps. Like camps are very hard on the body, especially now. This will be my first camp that I've done that's 6 weeks. I've never done a camp at 6 weeks, you know. In Rockhampton, my camps were, you know, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. I'd be lucky to get a month here and there. So this is my first proper camp, and yeah, even the smaller camps, the body just takes so much wear and tear that I think it's super important to take a little bit of time after the fight's off.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's something I've actually, you know, we've discussed, because before I met this guy, it was just train. Like rest day, what is that? But that's an area where this guy helps me. Again, he takes the coach hat off and puts more of like the big brother hat on, and he's like, "Hey man, like you need to chill, you need to rest." And then every time I do rest, when I come back to the gym, I just feel 10 times better.
That's so good. Yeah. And I think a lot of people lack that, where there is a good coach helping them to be able to take that step back and readjust. Where I know it's like this saying, the heart grows fonder when you're away from what you love doing. And it's just that you just come back stronger, more passionate, more ready to get in there and fight again. And it's a unique experience, which I wish I got to have as a kid, because I was like similar to you, just train. If I wasn't training, I was just studying footage from the ancient times to the most recent times. So it's like you are mastering the game, not just in the actual training session and in the competition, but it's outside as well. And not everyone has that, and it's such a great thing that
it
you
takes
have.
Confidence to take
it
a day off.
It does, definitely. And I know a lot of people will truly understand that.
No. Well, the other issue is as well is that like you need to. One of the things that I try to instill when I'm at FFT down with Coach Renato, when I'm working with all the guys, especially when they kind of hit their, I guess, like later 20s or into 30s, and me being a little bit older, like I'm 44 now, so I'm trying to, you know, instill a little bit of experience that I've had. And I'm like, you want to stay fresh. You want to keep the mentality of a teenager. Like teenagers are unique animals. There's just something really, you'll never get anything like a teenager.
100%.
But when you go into sport, teenagers play. They're like big puppies. They're big kids, right? And when you see teenagers, especially with things like where we are in Sydney, like rugby league, when I was younger at high school, you'd appreciate it too. Basketball, it was big back then. Kids copy their idols and people they're watching, and they pretend to be like, you know, like even what you were saying, like when you were younger watching like guys like Anderson Silva and Conor McGregor and GSP, whoever it is, you go into the gym and you're literally like, it's like you're playing PlayStation. You're pretending. But as we get older, we get a little bit more serious, and we probably, I think the right thing to say is you take yourself a bit too seriously, where I always tell the fighters, like, stay as a teenager. You know what I mean? Keep that freshness about you. But if you get a little bit too, and even I found Coopar has done this well, but sometimes he's kind of slipped into, you're like, we're going to do this. We're going to take over the world. We're going to win. I'm like, yeah, but you still need to keep that looseness, and that, like, teenagers are obnoxious, and they're just like, they're so full of, and think about it too, at that age, when you're 16, 17, 18, you're full of testosterone. Like you couldn't get more packed. So they're kind of loose. They're really quite loose, and everything's a game to them. And that's why, like I said to Coopar as well, it's like when I met him, he was fearless, like literally fearless. He didn't have a care in the world. But that's because you're new in the game and you're 100%. Fresh, you're an amateur, and it's all ahead of you, and you're coming at it like a bull. When you start to settle in, and I remember Customato, obviously the legendary boxing coach Customato, said the worst thing that can happen to a fighter is to become domesticated. And that is just the truth. Once you become domesticated, and that's what's happening a little bit to Coopar, which is a good thing, because we're trying to build we need him to be domesticated. We need him to do his washing and, look after himself. But at the same time, we don't want him to be too domesticated, because you lose that rawness, you lose that edge of what he had. When I met him, he wasn't domesticated. He was like, seeing him go into that cage, it was very different, you know.
No, I get it. Like, life's all about, I don't say it's about balance, but it's about integrations.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to integrate things in order for things to work.
Yeah.
And there's a great book called Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey, where he speaks about you want to keep everything in the B line. As soon as something goes to an A, something will go to a C.
Yeah.
And it's trying to remain that balance of keeping it at a B.
Yep.
And you spoke about liking GSP, right?
Yeah.
I got to meet him when he was at his prime back in Montreal, Quebec. It was so funny. Like, I remember as soon as he walked into the room in the wrestling hall, everyone stopped and looked at him, and the girls were just like melting at his feet. And his roommate at the time was saying, okay, girls, he's actually gay. And the girls were so devastated. Yeah, but he was like, heartbroken. But such a humble dude, even when he was at the pinnacle of martial arts. Like,
freak of nature. He still is. I mean, look at the condition he's in today, like in his early 40s. And the guy looks like if like Dana called him up, he'd
be ready to go.
He'd be ready
next week.
Physically, he'd be ready to go. You know what I mean? Like that's what kind of reminds me. Another big thing that Coopar and I have really, I guess, like tried to develop together is this concept of being a martial artist, which I very much regard you as well, as opposed to just being a fighter. And when we met, he was very much, like I said, that raw, he's a fighter. He's going in there to seek and destroy, you know, and we've discussed over many, many hours, countless hours, about there's more to it than just that. Like, don't sell yourself short as just being a young, you know, aggressive, want to get out there and, you know, tear down the world, which is a great thing. And that's where most young, hungry killers come from. They come from that. But through that journey, you discover that there's, again, don't sell yourself short, because there's so much more, you know, that you can get from martial arts. And one of the things I'm not sure whether he, minds me saying this, but one of the discussions we built our relationship a lot when he first come and stayed with me. And a lot of the times we connected was walking the dog at night. We take the dog together at night. It'd be night time, just me and Cooper, and we'd just be walking around and you're walking. So you're talking and talking, so important to develop, really good relationships. And one time we're having a discussion, it was really interesting. And we were just chatting and he said to me, I'm not afraid to die in the cage. And I said, yeah, I understand that, and he said, if I die in there, he said, what a beautiful place to die. Like, what a great place. And at first, because I'm not a fighter, I'm not him, I don't walk around, pretending that I'm living or existing like these guys are. They're on a whole nother level. And at first I was kind of like, yeah, wow, that's a very interesting concept. But the more I took time to think about it, I thought, we are all going to die. That's inevitable. And where and how we die. And I thought, although he'd be obviously very young, it would be an incredible place to die. That is the modern day, not that you want to, but that's, I could really see his point of view. And then as we were discussing, he said to me one night, and if I happen to kill the other guy, then that's the way it is. We signed this contract and I wouldn't be worried at all if they died. And I said to him, look, I understand what you're saying. I very much understand the mentality. I said, but we don't want anybody to die. I said, this is a sport. This is a martial art and it's a sport. I said, ideally, what we want to be able to test our skills, and you need your opponent. We learn all these skills. We learn how to kick, punch, strike, wrestle, grapple, beautiful submissions. But without your enemy, without your opponent, without your opposition, none of it will come to fruition. None of it. You are on your own, right? He calls me, can we get a fight? I'm like, no, man, no one wants to fight you. We can't fight. You're out. That's it. There's no one to fight. You're on the street. You want to fight someone, they all walk away. You're on your own. You need these dancing partners. That without Joe Frazier, without George Foreman, there is no Muhammad Ali. You wouldn't even know of Muhammad Ali without these great characters. And I really spoke to him a lot about, I guess, that kind of Bushido, kind of Japanese little bit mentality. Not that I profess to be an expert on it, but I have spent a long time in Japan and spoke to a lot of, really amazing instructors and senseis over the years. And as they said, the samurai was a very, very isolated, lonely kind of existence where death was almost inevitable. If you went to battle many moons ago, you either won, and the person that lost was the one that was dead. But a lot of times the person who was victorious was dying of injury 2 to 3 days after. So they were winning, but they were dying. And the samurai had this, where the respect of Budo martial arts, whether it be judo, sumo, karate, kendo, all these aikido, all the Japanese type classic martial arts, was that the samurai had more of a deep respect or even love for one another than anybody else, because those two people were more alike than anyone else. Even though you were going to kill each other, even though you were the enemy, you were literally one. And that's what I really tried to instill into him, that we're not going to this cage with the mentality to hurt someone or to kill someone. Your mentality is that you want to test your skills to the highest level against someone. And if you can shake hands and embrace afterwards, that's the ultimate aim, to be able to execute these skills. And one of my favorite MMA fighters, Lyoto Machida, obviously with the karate background, I still remember him coming on the TV one day. He had his gi and belt on. He was doing a kata. I started yelling out to my wife. I'm like, Tanya, there's a karate guy. There's a karate guy. So that was Machida. And I read once that his father never ever went to his MMA fights. And they said to him, how come your father's never here? And his dad said, I never ever want to see my son getting hurt or injured or lose to another man. I don't want to see my son getting put down and defeated. And at the same time, I never want to be there to celebrate the victory of him destroying someone else's son. And I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. That's where it becomes really special, so.
No, that is beautiful and so unique as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't actually think about that.
No, not at all.
And I just have one more question for both of you. What kind of legacy would you like to leave behind when you're gone?
You can go.
Legacy. For me, I definitely, by the time this is all said and done, you know, I want to go as far as I can with this sport. I want to be a world champion. I want to be a household name. But I really, really want to bring something back to Rockhampton. For the kids like myself who really, really had nothing, there's at the moment there's no options. Definitely not to be a fighter, but even just sports in general. There's really, other than rugby league, maybe rugby union. Other than rugby, there's really no options in Rockhampton. I would love to make combat sports, martial arts in general, but definitely combat sports, a option. You know, like that's what I want to do myself. I want to pave the way. I am paving the way, but I want there to be a clear path. Yeah, for myself, there was no path, and there still really isn't a path. But I would love that to be available for the kids back home in Rockhampton. So, yeah, like by the time I'm said and done, I really want there to be that path, you know, because combat sports, like everyone still now, like they all laugh at me, like they think it's crazy, you know, like it's a big risk that I took. You know, when I was 18 and I started this whole journey, that's that pivotal age where you're like, all right, what am I going to do with my life? And most people would just get, you know, a 9-to-5 job, but I took a massive risk here, and I'm still taking a big risk by saying, nah, I'm going to chase this dream. You know, when I started training, I didn't get into it just to be fit or learn how to fight or study a martial art. I've learned a lot through this guy in martial arts, but for me, it was the fighting. Like, I wanted to be a world champion from the first day. I was in my room, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a world champion. I'd never done a class. I was telling myself, I'm going to be a world champion. So, yeah, for me, this is a massive risk, but I really, for the kids back home, I want to pave that way and there to be a clear path. Yeah.
That's amazing. And our purpose is always bigger than just our own, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, like, to answer your question, like for myself, it's really interesting meeting not just Coopar, but a lot of the fighters that we're working with now. But again, I think that I don't know I've never really had an idea on like what a legacy, like I don't really think too much in that way. But I think that back to what I spoke about, like being a martial artist, and I think that martial arts is so exquisite. It's so amazing. And like I've spent a long time up in Rockhampton through Brant Kogel, and you know, I've made a lot of really good friends up there, and it's such a tough, you know, grassroots bread and butter part of Australia, and there's a lot of tough people up there, you know, and they're hardworking and they're good people, but they struggle. It's a struggling, you know, a lot of these areas outside of the cities in Australia are struggling. Big problems with drugs. The drugs are horrific, and it's getting worse. I really believe it is getting worse. I think the drugs are becoming just more accessible, and it's so sad that when you're at your most vulnerable, when you're young, that's where it's doing the biggest damage. You know, it's not like these older dudes it's happening to the younger ones. And I feel like combat sport is such a respected thing at the moment, boxing, but especially MMA. They've got these kind of heroes to look up to, and a lot of them, not all, but a lot of them are living clean lives because they're training and they're becoming athletes. And I think that's like, this guy's a great example where he's slipped from, you know, a kid, you know, that's basically running the streets, and then to go into this dream or this fantasy of, I want to be the next, you know, MMA world champion or whatever it may be. He then realizes, I can't live this life. I'm gonna have to tie up all these loose ends in to become a fighter, but also an athlete. So it's a great thing, but obviously not all kids can fight. Like, even if you come from Rockhampton, they look at someone like Coopar and they're like, oh, I want to be like him. But they may jump in there, spar, and realize that this is very hard. But martial arts, as you know, and what you promote constantly yourself, is that it has such a big base of opportunities. Like there's the side of it for learning and skill development. There's self-defense. There's the social aspect of it. Like I know so many of the younger ones, they just love being around him. There's a lot of young people I know that aren't fighters and can't fight, but they just want to be around him and they want to speak to him and they want to, you know, like even when he comes out with all of his outfits and he's got like, we've done all these themes, Ninja Turtles and Kung Fu Panda, and like up in Rocky now, I follow one of our mates, Brando, who has Vela Martial Arts. He's now invested a lot of his time and effort into this big performance center for MMA up there in Rockhampton. And I always follow them, and then I see all these kids and they've got Cooper's singlet or they've got Cooper's fight shorts on. And I love seeing that because you can see that they're in the gym, they're training, but they're wearing that little piece of him because it's like a mindset. It's like, I've got Cooper's singlet, you know, and like even some of the boys in Sydney, like I'll rock up to Rockdale and some of the boys have got the full fight kit. Like it's they'll have the shorts and the singlet. I'm like, that's so cool. Like that little bit of influence is huge. So again, I guess with Legacy, I really want to just help people to discover martial arts, you know, discover how big it can be. There is the fighting aspect of it there, which is what he wants to do and what he's motivated. But MMA is not cage fighting. That's one aspect of it.
Yeah.
But MMA is literally mixed martial arts, and that mixed martial arts has value for everybody. Whether you're, you know, an older person and you just want to come and start learning some jiu-jitsu, whether you want to do some boxing for fitness. I'm working with certain people now that have medical conditions and they're trying to use the training to assist with those types of issues. So that's the legacy that I really want to try and leave, is just to keep pushing martial arts to show people that it has such a great, you know, value to it.
That's beautiful. And I just want to thank you again for both coming down and having a great conversation. And until next time, we're off.
No worries. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it.
Cheers.